Hello everybody, you're listening to Dead Money with Dan Arfin. Dan Arfin, who is still the only person to have ever spoken a word on this fucking podcast. Anyway, I finally did it. I played poker at the Bellagio 510 in the late afternoon on Saturday after the Met game. I'm not, sick anymore. I feel basically fine, but this shit is still clearing out of me, and I knew that, but apparently it is clearing out even more so than I'd thought, because when I got to the casino, now I realize just how congested my ears still were. So I guess with being at home, there was really nothing that pressing for me to even listen to, plus there wasn't that much noise anyway, so I had no idea. But when I went somewhere full of people, now all of a sudden it feels like I'm wearing noise-canceling headphones. Anyway, so I played 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I won $80, and then I left. And what a thrill that was, because holy shit, I mean, everyone has their games and rooms where they run just terrible in. And for me, the two games that have given me constant and relentless headaches are, without question, the 510 at the Bellagio and the 2-5 at the Aria. But we'll get to the Aria a little later. But first, let me just give you some stats. In the 16 plus years I've lived in Las Vegas, I've only played approximately 569 hours of the Bellagio 510. And almost all of those hours were when the cap was still $1,500. Now it's $2,500. Now look, 569 hours is not nothing. It's enough for you to notice something. But I am also quite aware that it's nowhere close to a real sample size that would actually tell you about how you've been doing. The number I've heard often enough and have been working with is 1,500 hours. And after I came back 4.5 years ago, I just started recording results in 1,500 hour increments. Now, I've never played that many hours, 1,500 hours in 1 year, nor have I ever even come that close, and nor will I ever. So when I play 1,500 hours of a particular stake, it always goes into the next calendar year, but that doesn't matter. Once you've played 1,500 hours, that should be enough time for the variance to have done its thing fairly enough and give you a solid sense of what you've been worth. And once you have that, then you just start over and play another 1,500 hours. So 569 Bellagio 510 hours is way too small of a sample for it to mean anything. But the thing is, there's a reason I've only played 569 hours there, and the reason is I've constantly run like dog shit. Now don't get me wrong, I've won money from the game because that's what happens when you play substantially better than the competition. You win. However, my win rate is a hell of a lot lower than my career 510 win rate. Now, why is that? I don't know. Actually, no, I do know. The reason is, there is no fucking reason, and that is precisely why it is so motherfucking aggravating. Now, are there other rooms where I've sun-runned it completely over what has also been a small sample size? Yes, of course there are, because that's the way it works. If you run bad one place, then you'll run good someplace else. But you have no way of ever fucking knowing which places those are going to be, nor do you have any way of ever fucking knowing if or when things are going to take a dramatic turn anywhere. You know, sometimes poker players get extremely pissed off about the way things have been going, and they feel an urge to talk about it, but none of their colleagues are around. So they try saying something to a girlfriend or a family member or another friend, and they're not trying to make them understand hand histories or anything like that. They're just breathing out dragon fire. For instance, I might say, I run so fucking bad at this Bellagio game. And they almost helplessly might say, then don't play at the Bellagio. No! That That is not how this fucking works. That is ridiculous. This is poker, okay? No matter what's going on or where it's going on or who's dealing, whatever happens, it is always just poker. And there's nothing to say about it. Which is extremely comforting in a sense, but in the other sense, that is also extremely discomforting because this garbage can just continue. So this is just one of, 55,000 reasons why poker is the ultimate mindfuck. But however you want to look at it, the bottom line is simple. The roof of whatever establishment you happen to be sitting under when the cards are dealt to you has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on what results you ever get. Variance is just crazy. That's it. And the whole essence of the environment that occurs within poker is hostile and rattling. That is poker's very nature. It is a roller coaster. Now, some people are more emotional than others. But we all got emotions, and more than just a few of them. But results have nothing to do with the fucking room itself. Now, when someone tells you something infinitely oversimplified, such as, well, just don't play at the Bellagio, or even better yet, just don't play Ace King, they're just trying to tell you anything because they don't know what to tell you, so they tell you that, because it seems pretty linear to them. Oh, well, if you lose at that poker room, then just don't play at that room. Easy. Yeah, we wish it was that fucking easy. Now, none of this is their fault, of course. This is not what they do. They don't relate to a single thing you're talking about. So, you know it's going to be a useless and pointless conversation that may not do anything besides further incense you. But because you're feeling so fucking wretched about everything that's been going on, you still feel like you're urged to talk about it. But here's the funny part. They say, oh, well, just don't play there, and even though we all know that's completely senseless, oftentimes that is still what we end up doing. Because if there's a game in a certain room that is just seemingly without fail, giving you constant fits a huge percentage of the time, after a while, it just turns into variance schmariance. Fuck this shit. Fuck this poker room. I don't want to fucking play here. Because I'm so fucking tired of walking into this place, eager and ready to break the curse, ready to turn things around and feel like I'm actually competing again instead of getting perpetually boned, and then just walking back to the car, feeling like shit and getting exponentially more and more disgusted each and every fucking time it happens, because whenever, God forbid, you decide to poke your head out again and play at this place, you just promptly pick up right where you left off and get your fucking shit pushed in again! So now let's get to the aria, and then I'll blend the two together, and it'll be a really nice fucking combination. So the aria is coming up on 4 years since it raised its 2.5 buy-in cap from $1,000 to $1,500. The aria opened in December of 2009, so the 1K max lasted almost 12 years. Well, in those 12 years, I only played about 200 hours, and I'm down $10,000. Not pesos, not yen, dollars. Now look, the idea of someone losing $10,000 at 2.5 in 200 hours is not out of this world at all. Some people, if their variance is insane enough, they can lose that in just a couple of nights. But here's the thing. If you lose $10,000 in 200 hours over the course of 2 months and you don't think about it or care because this is your main room that you've won a lot of money in over the years, that's one thing. But when you don't play this game at this room that often, and you lose the $10,000 in 200 hours over the course of 12 years, that is different. It's not, but it is. In reality, it is. Because when you're only dropping in here every so often because you've been running awful here and are consistently getting annihilated, imprisoned, fucked in the worst of ways, with almost never an exception on what few occasions you decide to optimistically hit the reset button and try again, you just start feeling like a fucking moron for even showing up to this place. And before you know it, you've taken it off your list of places you can play poker, and that fucking sucks. The Aria is this big, gigantic, awesome facility to lots of people, but to me, it might as well be a fucking concentration camp. And my feeling toward the Bellagio 510 isn't light years ahead of that. Now, I said I'm a winner in the game, albeit a less than thrilling one, so there's that. I've obviously had some big nights and some good streaks. And plus, that sample is almost 3 times the size of the Aria 2.5, even though it's still pretty small. So in a sense, the two almost don't even compare. So let's just call it this. The Aria 2.5 1K Max was by far my most vicious run bad game. Now, since they raised the cap to 1,500, I've played about 100 hours, but only gotten a little back, so I'm still in the red. So not too much has changed. And I've wanted to play there more. And I don't want to still feel like I'm committing an act in self-loathing anytime I so much as pull into the parking garage there, but I do. And the Bellagio 510 specifically is a relatively distant second to the Aria in terms of places that have taken years off my life due to the excess anger they have caused. Now, before I go on, let me just say something else about variance. I don't know if it's been a year or less or more, but I'm getting the sense about something, and maybe I've only heard it in a couple places, but even that feels like a lot. So maybe it's just like a circulating energy that I'm sensing, that there are now all these people who have played poker for long periods of time. Not 200 hours, not 569 hours, long periods of time. And some of them are not particularly enamored with their results. They envision something far better than this. But these people leave these subtle but not subtle suggestions that which say, well, I don't know. I don't think I ran that great. Okay. Poker is a brutal game, so here's the brutal truth. If you've played a substantial amount, either at least or far beyond 1,500 hours, and your results aren't good, chances are it's because you aren't good. It's not the variance's fault, it's your fault. You may have some strengths, and you may have gone in periods where you really felt like you improved to a level that most players didn't and had really carved out a real edge for yourself. But that doesn't mean it was true. People are fooled by randomness all the time. So it very easily can just be a fantasy of years or whatever length of time that eventually got shattered by reality, as reality can only do. If I'm in a room with 40 people, and let's say they've played 80 to 100,000 hours between them, and they're all either break even or losing or slight winners, and they're all telling me they don't think they ran that good, well then I suppose, and only suppose, that could be conceivable, not probable, conceivable for maybe a couple of them. One thing that isn't the case is all 40 of these people who have put in a ton of hours have all just ran bad, and that's why they lost or didn't win anything significant. But I'm starting to get that feeling about the poker world, and that there's more and more people who are just subtly griping about their luck more than anything else. Meanwhile, they could have been trying to get better somehow. Do you ever think maybe that's why you don't appear to be running that good, because everyone else is improving and you're still going to sleep with your thumb in your ass acting surprised that you, once again, didn't get called when you jammed the river with the nuts, even though that is basically the only hand in your river jam range for the last 2 fucking years? What did you think was going to happen? When dealing with a large sample, the variance affects your results by a relatively small margin. For instance, if you're worth $70 an hour at 2.5, which is 14 big blinds an hour, and that of course is great, but you run rather hot, maybe you'll win $78 an hour for an extra $12,000. And maybe someone else worth $70 an hour. It ran a little shitty and only won 62. So over 1,500 hours, you won $117,000, even though you should have only won $105,000. And the other guy wins $93,000 instead of $105,000. So you win $24,000 more than the other guy, but you both still did quite nicely. That's the kind of impact we're talking about here when it comes to variance over large samples, real samples. If your play is worth $70 an hour and you play 1,500 hours of 2.5, you're not going to lose $15,000 that year or only win like $10,000 because of variance. That's out of the question. I don't know how wide the margin can really stretch in either direction because poker is overrun with so much fucking guesswork. All aspects of it. But the guesswork can be analyzed and broken down a lot of different ways. And if you're analyzing the right information in the right ways, you can form very informed hypotheses. But because the guesswork also extends to trying to merely wonder just how above or below expected value, EV, that you've run, isn't it interesting that more and more of the so-so players at best, in a world with more and more people waking up every day refusing to take responsibility, are suggesting that it's not them who's causing them to either not win that much or lose money? It's the variance. And it makes me think of that great line in that old classic black and white movie, The Hustler. Burt Gordon, played by George C. Scott, tells Fast Eddie Felson, played by Paul Newman, "That's something you don't need as an excuse for losing. Feeling sorry for yourself, a sport enjoyed by everybody." I'm not saying everyone runs fair every year. I'm just saying people need to stop obsessing over their variance and just concentrate on playing well, because the variance, at least in cash games, runs quite close to appropriate for everybody who's played enough. And maybe we should all think of it this way. Why is it that year in and year out, certain players are always taking way more money off the table than some of the players who are also in there grinding every day? What makes some of these other players so special? Well, look, poker players are detectives trying to solve a mystery each and every hand. And the mysteries are, what does my opponent have or probably have? What does my opponent think I have or probably have? What do I have to bet to get my opponent to think I have X or Y when I'm under the impression that he has A or B? Or is it wise for me to even bet anything? Is it best that I just get out of the way? Poker players are detectives, and throughout each hand, each decision a player makes is revealing clues about what their hand not only is right now, but is likely to be in future situations when you encounter them in situations comparable to this one. When detectives investigate a crime scene, the better detectives find more clues and connect the dots between all the found clues more accurately. They know which bits of information to them matter and which ones don't. So, they make better progress and end up being the ones who figure out why there's a dead guy here with a dildo in his mouth. Well, all the same, the better poker players are better detectives. And without the use of a Sherlock Holmes hat and magnifying glass, they pay attention to the details that actually matter, and they connect the dots more seamlessly. They are more apt at seeing what is actually taking place versus fancifully jerking themselves off with what they hope is taking place, only to find out that they had no clue as to what the hell was actually going on. And they don't let emotion get involved too distractively too often. I may have insane amounts of emotion. I get overwhelmed all the time. But I'm pretty close to just as good at keeping that under control. Alright, so, Bellagio 5-10 time, finally. 2 games going, and I sat down about 5:45, and I liked what I saw a lot. No one seemed like they'd be particularly fishy, but nobody, including the regs, struck me as someone who's going to be particularly challenging either. And in spite of how little I've played it over the years, I know that this is often the case with the Bellagio 5-10. This game tends to play probably the smallest of all the 5-10 games in Vegas. Now, that's not to say it plays small. The stakes are what they are. But the player pool at this place is oftentimes no savvier or even different from the way a ton of 2-5 players play. So that's what this game seems like. Just a 2-5 game, except we're playing 5-10. Now, I don't want to play in this game because there's like other friends in the sandbox like me who also want to be nitty. I want to play in this game because I think I stand to match up in ways I like the most. And that's what's made running way below EV in this game so fucking aggravating. Nothing is more tilting than playing against shitty, nitty players and then watching their unimaginative, uncreative, unimpressive, uninformed strategy succeed. But that's been my experience at this game a lot. Time after time after time, spot after spot after spot, I am getting either check raised or raised at the most bizarre times. And so you know there's hardly any bluffing going on ever, you just keep folding. But after a while, you just feel like a fucking whipping boy piece of shit who everyone is abusing, even though they probably aren't. But because of all this elongated history, when I enter this game, and having not played these stakes for a while, the main thing on my mind is just to not overthink things and proceed as though this environment is going to play so vastly different from 2-5, because it isn't. Anyway, so 7 minutes into the session, a couple guys limped and there was a raise to 60. One guy called. The button 3-bet to 260. And the open raiser jammed over 1,600 total. It folded back to the button and he immediately called. The jammer had aces and the button had kings and the aces won. So clearly a lot has changed since the last time I've played this game. Now the first hand I got to play went like this. The guy who just doubled with the aces, he had just joined the game about 5 minutes before I did. I saw him take the seat, so he's off to a terrible start. He limps in middle position. Okay. Everyone folds to the small blind. He makes it 40, and I call with Jack 10 of clubs in the big blind, and we go 3 ways. And it was a dream flop for my hand. It came 3-4-4, no clubs, rainbow. Pretty standard. And the limper ended up winning this pot on the flop. But okay, no problemo. The next hand I got to play was almost the same action. The same guy limped in from middle position, only this time everyone folded, so we're heads up and I checked with 6-3 off in the big blind. The flop was 9 deuce tray with a diamond and 2 spades. I checked and he checked. The turn, I hit a 6 for 2 pair, 2 flush draws now. I almost min-bet $10, but I bet $20, and he promptly raised me to 50. And let me tell you something. This hand, this spot, I know it's a small pot, but that's just it. This little stupid hand getting pricked by another thorn, this sequence of action sums up my entire time put in at Bellagio 510 entirely. He opened lips. Okay, excellent. Then he checks back this flop, but now is showing up with a raise on this turn card, which is hardly ever supposed to happen. And with this guy looking and playing like he has been since just joining the game, he's not bluffing. So I don't know why I didn't just fold. I call because I have 2 pair. The river misses both flushes, but it's a 5, so only 4 makes it straight. I check, and I don't know. He probably potted it. I don't know what he did. He bet something real, and I folded. And it's just like, here we go again, because this is how it starts, right? First, you just lose one little annoying hand. Okay, no big deal. Except then you lose another one. And then you lose another one. And then you lose another one. And then you lose a couple medium big pots, and before you know it, just like that, you're buried in a couple hours, and it's deja vu all over again. And as this whole session went on, granted it was a brief one, it did feel like that even though I was fine with the lineup, that I was still sort of reacclimating myself with the environment of being in a game that's given me a lot of headaches spread out over a large number of years, even if it's not been a large number of hours. And I was playing a little paranoid at times. That's what happens with the recency bias of our tiny little pea brains. Until things start turning good again for you consistently, a constant ravaging, especially when it's spanned the entire life of a dog, is going to fuck with you a little bit. It becomes hard to not be afraid of doing something that had once felt normal until 9 out of 10 times you did it, you got put in an awful spot. Eventually, it's just like, okay, well, I guess I'm just not allowed to do this ever. Got to do something else instead. But before I get to some of my more complex spots, I'll talk about some of the dumb things that were said at the table. And by the way, it took but 26 minutes for me to realize I already have like 8 stories from sitting in this nonsense. So there's this white guy in seat 8, and he's just the classic-looking 50-year-old something Bellagio nit reg who consistently speaks but hardly ever says anything worth listening to. And if you've played this game, then you know just the type I'm talking about and how you can spit and hit one anytime you show up to the Bellagio before dark. For instance, he was in seat 8, and he got into a 3-way pot with seats 6 and 7, the guy sitting next to him, and he says to them, "Someone from this side of the table is going to win the pot." Okay. Thank you for pointing that out to us. That is a very astute and most clever observation where none of our lives would have been the same if not for you sharing that wisdom. You might say he's just being friendly, but I say 2 things. 1, no, I think he just loves hearing himself talk and finding reasons to do it. And 2, even if he was being friendly and I'm just being a dick, I challenge anybody. You try listening to that corny, senseless, and thoroughly unfunny noise all fucking day as you relentlessly get 3-bet, 4-bet, raised, and check raised. So then, this is great. In another hand, that same guy raises to 30 on the button, and the small blind was the guy who lost with the kings to the aces. He calls, and the big blind called too. And the flop was queen 9-4 with 2 clubs, and I think the small blind donk bet 60. It falls to the button, and he jams 800 total and gets snap called. And after saying, "That's up to you, no, it's up to you, it's up to you, no, it's up to you, no, it's up to you, no, it's up to you," about 7 times each, they finally ran it twice. A club came on the river of the first board, and the button yapper said, "That's me." And on the second run, a club came on the turn, and he felt the need to repeat, "That's me." And then another club rivered for good measure, but that time he stayed silent. But then the small blind says, "I think I got them both," and turns over ace-8 of clubs for the nut flush on both boards. Neither board had paired. And then the button says, "You beat me by 1 point," so he obviously had the king-high flush. But I've never seen that, where a card comes and a guy says, "That's me," like he's sure he's won, only to have the other guy not only turn over a better hand, but turn over the nuts. Imagine being the small blind where you're seeing yourself catch the nuts on both boards, and both times your opponent is saying, "That's me." God, what blah, blah, blah. God, what would I have done to have been the small blind? I just said, "Oh yeah, what do you got? What do you guys got on me this time?" Anyway, so the next hand I play was a continuation of Death by 1,000 Cuts. It folds over to me. I have 7-3 of diamonds on the button. And both of the blinds seems nitty and probably not good, and I wanted to just win a fucking hand. And I know this is maybe a little too loose, but hey, maybe I'll flop a straight flush. So I make it 30. Small blind folds, and the big blind tank calls. Obviously. The flop comes 10-3-5 rainbow, and I have a pair in the backdoor flush draw. He tanks again and donks into me $40. And this guy, by the way, hasn't played a hand since I've sat down. I haven't been here more than a half hour, but it was still the first time he got involved that I could recall, so once again, I'm annoyed, because so far, this initial half hour is playing exactly like so many other sessions have. Now, I doubt his hand is that strong, but it's probably not that weak. I'm not sure. So I considered raising, but my hand turns very well, so let's just call and see the turn card. There's a lot of runouts I can bluff with anyway. But you already know, I completely brick the turn. It's the 2 of spades, 2 spades now. He donks again for close to the pot, and I just gave it up. Then one of the regs comes back from a break. He posts $15 in the cutoff. It folds to him, and he checks. And then the button raises to 40. It folds to me, and the raiser, again, was the guy who lost to the aces when he had kings and then doubled up by running it twice and scooping despite being told, "That's me," by his opponent both times. Now, based on the button's aura at the table and just his play, everything, I mean, it's clear he's among the players here who isn't a total moron, but isn't that good, and I have king 10 offsuit. I came close to 3-betting to like 160 or more. And I think it's fine if I did that, since the guy who posted was a reg and not someone I'm like eager to play with. But I just called. We go heads up, and of course now I flop top 2 pair. But the flop was still a bit dramatic because it was king 10-9 rainbow. I check to him, and he bets 50. And I know that, like, you know, the higher frequency move here is going to be to check raise. But it's not like calling on occasion is this egregious blunder, so I called. And oh, by the way, another reason why I didn't 3-bet pre was because if I did, his cards would have magically turned into aces and he would have 4-bet. And all the same, part of why I didn't check raise his flop, because if I did, now he would magically wind up with a better hand that he'd either 3-bet now or wait until after I've already lost a lot more money to him to give me the good news. This is just what happens when you have years and years and years and years of sessions where you get coolered constantly. Doesn't matter how big the sample is. You just start assuming that's what it's going to be because that's what it's always been. Even though it's supposed to be totally random and should completely turn in your favor at some point. But all right, king 10-9, check call 50. The turn was a 6, so 8-7 makes a straight, but he's more likely to have that than I will, since check calling that open ender, the 8-7 open ender on that flop is not good. It's not worth very much when the board is already king 10-9. If you hit the 6, you have a straight, but you don't have the nut straight. And if you hit the jack, you still lose to a queen, and it's a 4-liner anyway, so what the fuck is that going to do for you? So I'm not really going to have this hand. So he checks back, and I assume he's not afraid of that hand either. And the river was a 3. Pot is 195. I bet 110, he calls, and I win. Now I know I can for sure go a little bigger here, and in the moment I even felt that I should. But for some reason, I didn't want to. And when I think about what hands that I want to have call me, chances are they would call a bigger size if they could bet that flop as long as they weren't bluffing. And I also think in these spots that 10x and 9x will be checking back the flop pretty often, so I should discount those hands for the most part. But like I said, the guy just seemed like a bit of a dummy. And if he had a king or better, then I think he'd have just kept betting the turn. I might be wrong about that, but if I'm not, then my river size is pretty good. Next hand of interest was an early position raise to 30 from one of the regs. I call with pocket 3s in the cutoff. I think it's probably fine since the game wasn't going to 3-bet that much. The big blind in C-Day called as well, but he didn't have any hilarious jokes to crack this time. The flop came 8-7-3 rainbow. Okay. Big blind checks and the razor bets 30. I figured I'd just call and thought that even more so when I saw the big blind had already picked up his cards, clearly indicating he's going to fold. And that's another thing I hate when players do. It's amazing how much time people waste talking or looking at their phones or ordering food or doing any other self-centered dick-off action when it's their turn slowing down the game. But when they're in a multi-way pot, they have no problem tipping off that they're folding when there's other people left so that they can save themselves 3/4 of a second, since it would be too thoughtful for them to just sit idle and not do anything to show they're folding until it's their fucking turn. So we're heads up and the pot is about 150, and I make the boat when the 7 of diamonds comes, 2 diamonds now. The razor checks, and I think I can afford to go fairly big here, so of course I kept it on the lower side again and bet 90, and he called. The river was the 9 of diamonds, so a possible straight flush is there, and he checks. Now, given that a million hands got there, even though I have a boat, I thought his range was pretty weak now, so I thought I should size down so that all the one pair hands, with or without a diamond blocker, will get curious enough to call. So, of course, this is the time I went big. I bet 270, and he folds frustratedly. Now, it's not that I'm upset I made a full house. But it's just like, yeah, this is what happens when I get a big hand in this game. I get all excited and either win very little, or I get thrown a most sickening curveball when I least expect it, and now it's apparent I'm beat. So then came my most interesting hand of the day. It falls to the hijack. He makes it 30, and I 3-bet to 90 with pocket eights as the cutoff. This was my first in-possession 3-bet. He called, and I had just seen him call in almost this exact spot with pocket jacks where the guy on my left had 3-bet him, so take that for what it's worth. The flop was 10-9-4 rainbow, and he check-called 80, and I was already well considering turning this hand into a bluff on a lot of runouts. And there's a fair chance I'm still ahead, but if I am, it's going to be tough to get much value from those hands. But the turn was an 8. How about that? Still no flush draws. He checks again. And this is the type of spot I'm talking about. Same as when I flopped top 2 and took a more passive route. I don't think that was a bad decision, but there's no doubt it was partially influenced by what's gone on the previous decade or whatever the fuck it's been. But this spot, this is a funny one. And, for starters, I'd be checking back a lot of hands here. Every overpair, every 10x, pocket 7s, top 2 pair. But this hand, third set, well, we know it's well behind to the nut straight and almost dead against a set of 9s or 10s. Him having the low straight with 7-6 isn't out of the question, so if we include that hand, and maybe we shouldn't, but if we include that in his range, that's 14 combos that have me. Now, I'm still crushing bottom set or top 2 pair, and all these hands are not always going to be check raising the flop. He can certainly have pocket jacks again, or pocket 7s, or jack 10, or queen 10 for top pairs with straight draws, although queen 10 is only a gut shot straight draw. So there's a bunch of hands that have some outs for this river that may or may not want to call a hefty sized turn bet, and there's also a bunch of hands that could just have me in bad shape. Now, there's also hands that will definitely fold turn since they figured they're crushed, but might. They also might either make a small, medium-ish bluff on the river, or they might improve to something worse than a set of 8s if I check. But I think the biggest thing here is if I check, I think the pool is likely to play pretty faced up on the river based on what size they bet, if they bet at all. And if they have me beat, they will almost certainly be going pretty big on the river, probably close to pot. And I'll likely just pay it off, even though I'm sure I won't want to. But a big size will at least keep me from raising, and I'll get to save money against what I presume to be a cooler. But if they pick something in only the 65 to 70% pot range, or smaller, then that I will raise. And you have to figure it's going to get called by worst fairly often, since the raise is now going to look really strange. And assuming so, you'll often end up winning at least about the same size pot against the hands that would have called the turn, but you get to limit the damage against the cooler. And if they're bluffing the river with something that would have called the turn, then those hands would just check fold the river, so you really won't be missing much value against those hands either. Now, I'm not saying there's zero downside to checking, there is, but altogether, I think checking, even this strong of a hand, has legit amounts of merit and will perform pretty well in this spot. And especially since there isn't a flush draw like there was here, and that only happens about 25% of the time. So the river comes in ace. He checks. Pot is 355. I bet 1/3, 120, and he quickly folded angrily. Of course. So this was a must-move game, and then I got transferred to the main game. I was mostly card dead, plus most of the hands were straddled. But then comes his hand. There's this ugly lumberjack-looking guy sitting on my left now. Another classic look for a Bellagio 510 player. So not a vastly different look from the goober in seat 8 making all his knee-slapping jokes. This guy had a thick gray beard that wasn't super long. His hair was a joke. And this was the same nitty-looking guy that donked into me when I had the 7-3 of diamonds on the button. And then he bet the flop into me. Now, before we moved tables, he moved before me. He had just lost a big pot with pocket kings. He had 3-bet from the small blind and flopped a set, but his opponent turned a straight, and he doubled him up. So I know that Scruffy is stuck, and he's on my left, and then comes a hand where it's my button, the straddle is on, and we all fold to Scruffy in the small blind. He raises to 45, and this European reg, who I never saw before but seemed pretty competent, makes it 160 in the big blind. The straddle folds, he's also a good reg, and the small blind calls. So the pot has 345, and the flop is Queen 8-4 rainbow. I didn't cash the size, but the small blind donk bet this flop also. It's probably like 200. And the big blind calls. Turn is a 7, so 6-5 is the nuts. And now he donks again, betting 500. Big blind calls again. And the river is a 5, so any 6 is a straight. There's no possible flush. And now Scruffy jams 1755, which was about the size of the pot. And the reg tanked in agony for quite a while. He tried to get a read on Scruffy a bunch of times. He's talking to himself, he's replaying the tape. And when I first sat down, I'd already decided I hated Scruffy, so I was really happy when he lost with that set of kings. But now I was actually kind of rooting for him. Not because my opinion had changed. This was more me rooting for the reg, a fellow reg, to make the wrong decision. Now, I had nothing against the reg. And even though I wasn't losing in the game, I did have numerous spots come up in what little time I was there that I was not particularly happy with. There were more spots than the ones I told you about. There were others too that they just didn't make the cut. And I was just thinking more again about how this game always has to drive me fucking insane 90% of the time, and because of that, I wanted to see another reg suffer. This is just what happens with me when I'm in an extended period where I'm just not super thrilled with the way things have been going and the way I've been playing, whether I've actually been playing questionably or not. Misery loves company, and right now I wanted nothing more than this Euro to fuck up and sit on my lap. And even though I didn't hate him, I still have to point out that it is so brutal when two players you hate are playing a huge pot together because you can't decide who you want to lose or how. So the reg has all the chips lined up to call, and all along I thought he was going to call and probably lose. Instead, he folds and then gets shown the king-jack offsuit for a stone, airball, triple barrel spaz, button-clicking punt, bluff that happened to work. Now, I said Scruffy was a nit, and to a substantial degree, I maintain that he is. I've said in previous episodes that you don't get aggression points for bluffing when you only do it when you're losing and are probably on tilt. That's not strategery. That's desperation. And I'll say it again. When we're all playing, every decision we have to make throughout the day, there's just all these invisible numbers floating around the table, and we're trying to pick the most sensible ones clean out of the air. And Scruffy, in his king-jack offsuit, he receives no credit for this. We credit him for the fact that he's capable of bluffing big when he's losing, and that could help him get him called later by somebody else. But he did not make a single intelligent decision this whole hand. He did not pick a single valuable floating invisible number out of the air. And he will get what's coming for this, because he was very lucky that a four-liner straight hit the river and that his opponent ended up leveling himself. The reg said he always calls with this hand. And I think he said he had two pairs, so that probably meant he had 8-7. But then he also added that he really didn't even know why he didn't call this time. I guess he just couldn't pull the trigger. I mean, look, it's hard. And it's hard because guys who look like Scruffy are seldom bluff jamming the river for over 1,700. But let's just run back the tape here. Scruffy opens with King Jack offsuit in the small blind, which is normal. But then he gets 3-bet from the middle blind, and it's just like calling here is just begging for trouble. And his hand is unsuited, so its value as a 4-bet bluff goes way down. He's in a bad spot, so folding is just fine. But he calls, he flops nothing, he turns nothing, he rivers nothing, but he just keeps vomiting money into the pot until he managed to pull it off. Pure blindness that wandered straight into the vagina instead of Jaws' mouth. But the best part about all this were Scruffy's adrenaline-infused thrill comments after the hand. The first thing he said was, and this is an 8-handed game, that he, meaning the reg, he said, he's one of the 3 guys I was most afraid to bluff. Then the other reg said to him, most afraid? He says, yeah, I was really afraid he would call. Then I said, well, that sounds like a reason you should be giving for not bluffing him, not bluffing him. And then when the regs asked again why he bluffed after announcing he was someone he was afraid to bluff, then he said, oh, I figured he just didn't care about the money. Once again, that statement is completely incongruent with triple barrel bluff jamming. And I'm not kidding. This is what Scruffy said, word for a word, right after he won. And I said to the reg on my right, I have not heard one intelligent word spoken since this hand ended. But he wasn't done yet. Then Scruffy said, I just decided I was going to try and rep a queen and then go from there. Even as the board ran out with 4 to a straight. And then the Euro, who got bluffed, said something along the lines of, I thought you might have a 6. Normally, I never would. And then Scruffy closes his analysis with, oh, that 6 is never in my range. Never. Once again, that's a good reason to not bluff. Oh boy, well, at least I got what I wanted. I got to see the reg hate himself for a little while. So it was a brief little dip in the shallow end of the kiddie pool. I didn't love my play today, but I survived. I didn't stay much longer after that since the game was kind of bad and there was a lot of straddling and I kind of just wasn't feeling it anymore. I planned to stay much longer at first, probably at least a couple more hours, but I changed my mind. I do plan to be back, though, because this pool, I know, is not going to be overrun with all-star poker players too frequently, so I think it'll be good for me to, at the very least, just mix between this game and the Win-2-5. I don't know what the hours distribution is going to look like, or if they'll ever shift drastically in either direction. The main thing right now is just ridding of this mental block of never playing 5-10 again, because I do want to play it. I don't want to serve a self-induced life sentence at 2-5. I mean, I know sometimes after something goes bad, like when I absolutely punted in the most despicable fashion ever of my life to that fucking whale the day before I turned 40, that I feel like I have to make some massively drastic change to make up for it, but I don't. At least not as drastic as I'd originally thought. I mean, that blunder was really bad, but it was important because it finally woke me up and alerted me that I don't want to play 2-5 exclusively, and that it's time to play some 5-10 and just let the trajectory take me where it's supposed to. Because who knows? I just might end up regging this Bellagio 5-10 or saying fuck it and not caring at all after a few weeks and just dropping it and have peace of mind and never think about it again. But for now, I live to talk about my first little peek back at it. And they're not all Phil Ivey. The game is completely crushable. So, now I've given myself some more options, so good for me. And it was nice to be back at the Bellagio. I love that place. But alright, that is enough for this week. We'll see you next time.